I'm having a difficult time with choosing which episode series to place you in, Raquel Cepeda, because you seem to fit in Leapers, which is one of my episode series, really well because of a certain decision that you leaped into in 2015. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later and expand. But Leapers predominantly features individuals who aspire to courageously dive into their aspirations, even if the paths presented to them bring elements of the unknown. And the other series that I'm thinking of putting you under is Venezuela Abroad, which is technically the same idea as Leapers, but with an emphasis on representing the identity of Venezuelan individuals who are scattered around the world, making a difference in international communities. But you have strong characteristics under both. You're a leaper, you're Venezuelan. So for you, I made a compromise and I was like, okay, this is gonna be the first episode has with a Venezuelan leaper. I combined the two of them, and I've been waiting for the day that an episode allows me to make an interconnection in front of my audience because that's what this whole podcast is about and this YouTube is about. It's about pretty much combining the elements of many different areas of life and being able to make an interconnection and kind of like not settle for one thing and make sure that we're in general expanding as people. So I wanted to introduce you, but I saw an interview where you introduced yourself because you who knows you better than you. And what I'm going to say that I know about you is that you're a jazz artist. You're a Latin jazz artist. I did not know that Latin jazz was a thing. I didn't know it was a subgenre of jazz. And I'm ready for you to introduce yourself and introduce this jazz concept to me because it's really interesting and I'd love to know more. So the wonders as well want to know who you are.
Well, thank you so much, Valerie, first of all, and happy to be here at your channel. Well, my name is Raquel Cepeda, and like Valerie said, I'm a jazz singer, originally from Venezuela. And I grew up in a family of musicians, but was always passionate about science. So I went into engineering school, and later, as I graduated as a geological engineer. Later, I worked for some time at the oil industry in Venezuela, did a master's in Colorado here in the US in geological sciences. Now, during all this path, I have been always doing music because even though I felt passionate about science, growing in a family of musicians and of course having this beautiful instrument, which is a voice. What more can you expect? Of course, you can't avoid feeling drawn into singing. So all throughout my college years, I participated in many events. I was called to do concerts and shows and things like that. So, I had the opportunity to grow every time more. And eventually, yeah, of course, I came to the US with my master's, worked in the oil industry for 10 years, but all through this time, I still continued doing music some way or another, with maybe a lapse in between that maybe we can talk about later.
Of course.
But yes, now why jazz? Well, jazz, I guess it was introduced to me as a child by different sources. One of those sources was one of my brothers who gave me an LP, yeah, vinyl back then when I was 8 years, 9 years old, and it was Frank Sinatra, and I loved it. I was like, "Oh my God, this is the best." Then I was listening to public radio in Venezuela, the cultural station, and I got the chance to listen to Ella Fitzgerald for the first time. I fell in love with her, so I continued really. Looking for the ways of learning more about it, of learning how to sing yeah, that way. And of course, coming from Venezuela, you come from a very different cultural background, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, jazz, the majority of jazz recordings come from the US. It was originated in the US with all the influences
Right?
from the African community, the Europeans, and some sparks of creative development that happened in situ. And so, as a child, I my family only spoke Spanish. However, I was so interested by music and the sound of English in music that I used music as an instrument to learn English, and of course, then I perfected it at school. And it opened a lot of doors for me, not only professionally, of course, but music-wise, right? And I mean, we're speaking today, in English too. So,
Yeah.
but when I came to the US and, worked for 10 years and then decided to leave the oil industry, and we can talk more in depth about that later, over time, I was doing straight ahead jazz, which is the standard American jazz, which is one of my biggest passions, right? So, but it came the opportunity after several years in 2017 to do a show at a club here in Houston, and the person that proposed the show to me had seen me doing a Latin jazz show with a different band. It wasn't my personal project, it was somebody else's project. But she saw me and she fell in love with it. And she said, why don't you come and do something within that style with the Latin jazz? There's not a lot going on here in Latin jazz in Houston. And, you have to understand, well, first of all, jazz is a niche within any city around the world. Is not, even though it's kind of like a primal music for the American people, um, it is not the most popular at this time. So you have this niches, and within these niches, of course, the Latin jazz is a subgenre, like you well said, and it's it's something that you don't hear very commonly. Now, what is
Yeah.
Latin jazz? Is pretty much the use of the greatest elements in jazz, which are the improvisation, the way of structuring and writing a song so that other musicians can join, which is pretty much putting a lead sheet, which is kind of like the basic guidelines that allow then people to improvise without necessarily reading note by note. And of course, the use of particular chord structures and forms that use sounds that were not what the original European music was like. So, it adds different notes that add color, different moods and different colors that are not just the typical, basic chords. So jazz in that regard really is like a leap in the intellectual enjoyment and perception of music, because it has all those different chord structures and chords that are really come apart from the traditional music that was being played during those times, the 30s, 20s, and also allows for a lot of improvisation. Now, that's jazz. So when you, oh, and of course, not to forget about all, the different influences that it's bringing from different parts of the world. Now, within traditional jazz, the main rhythm pattern is swing, and you know, uh, it's what we're used to, and you can hear in different speeds and different with little different variants here and there, but in the end, is swing. Now, with Latin jazz, what we're doing is taking all those wonderful things about jazz, the improvisation, the chords, the way of writing up a music lead sheet so that everybody can improvise, and adding, instead of just basing our music in swing, we're kind of incorporating other rhythms and other instruments as well that are part of the Latin heritage. Or, of course, within that Latin heritage, of course, we still dig even deeper into what is our Afro-Latin heritage, Afro-Brazilian influences and heritage. So it's kind of like putting more to the front the the patterns and the flavors and the colors that come from the Latin and the Afro-Latin culture.
I'm from Venezuela too. And I think that the combination of that whole subgenre, the combination of all those multicultural approaches interests me the most because in general, that's what I aim to do is to kind of because we're from Venezuela, right? I think my main influence to in general have a multicultural approach to my work. So my creative work, which is Wonder Impulse, which has to do with different locations, right? I combine different locations, like the lessons that have occurred in different places historically, as well as self development in general. And I combine that. And was that in a way because of your move from Venezuela? We're both immigrants. We're both here because I would imagine so the political situation and as well because your job was brought you here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Initially, it was because I came to do a master's degree here, like I mentioned before. And of course, right at the time that I came, that was year 2002. 2002
Yeah.
is an iconic year in Venezuelan story, contemporary story, because it was the big oil strike. And when that happened, of course, I was working at the oil industry, and almost my full department was laid off. All the company was transformed, and there was a lot of uncertainty at the time that I was here because it happened just after I came to the U.S. So at that moment, I was married. My ex-husband was American, and our initial plan was to go back. We had already figured out, talked about it. It was like, okay, we're going back to Venezuela. But when this happened, right after we came, it's like, well, we need to really consider what we're going to do because things are getting really rough over there. So eventually we, moved our years so that we could just stay here waiting for things to pass, which they never did.
Then yeah, never.
And but yeah, meanwhile, well, I kept doing my life here. So
Yeah, I see. So what I really loved to hear was the fact that you were first immersed in jazz, like kind of like the swing jazz, how you described it, right? Kind of like the more
straight ahead.
um
Yeah. Hmm.
popular one, right? And I love that you mentioned Frank Sinatra because it's probably like the only I want to know more about jazz now because of you because
Great.
it's the mixture that you did, like the fact that you went to like that Latin subgenre. I think it's so interesting to me because I love the fact that you were able to combine your heritage with what you do, and I
Yeah.
feel like did that come so this is like where it gets really fascinating for me is the fact that it gets a little bit precise for the individualized, right? So when that occurred, like you said, you were mentioned by a friend about to do Latin jazz. They were like, okay, in Houston it might start coming up, so or like it is coming up, like you would do great there. Like were you aware of that before?
There was a need. It's like, Houston is a big city, and it has
Yeah.
an amazing multiculturality to it. And of course, yes, music wise, there's all sorts of things that you can choose from. But there wasn't at that moment, like a steady reference to Latin jazz and a presence of Latin jazz in Houston. There's a lot of Latin music that sounds very like, you know, like Dominican music or like Puerto Rican music or like
Mhm.
Venezuelan music or, like those niche sub niches, right? But that uh, integration that I mentioned before of the elements of jazz with the Latin flavors, um, there has been very few groups that have worked on that here in the city of Houston. Um, I have to mention Norma Centeno, for example. She did some of that, and she was also a composer. She passed away several years ago, and some people doing things here and there, maybe more at the instrumentalist level, not so much at the singing level. And so there's some sort of a need because the Houstonian is a somehow of course you have a lot of things in Houston, different types and personalities, but
Yes.
you have people in Houston that are very cosmopolite, and they're yearning for that vibe that, for example, New York has, right? And
Mhm.
with all that melange of cultures and music, and you can feel it in the music. So yeah, I think that her request came from that, her really catalyzing somehow the feel and the need of the Houstonian to get to have access to live music that represented that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was a beautiful opportunity for me because before I was doing straight ahead and I was super happy with it, and this came as a challenge to me. It's like, okay, I can see that there is a need for it. How am I going to make it happen? Right? How am I going to give her what she needs, what she wants, um, at Raquel's style? With my own flavors to it, with my own thinking and
Spy. Yeah.
processing, right? So, the beautiful thing also about that, which I think it's, essential to making any project happen, is that there was a date. She found a date at the club and she said, here's a date, you know, do something Latin. So it was like, I have situations in my life where I have people telling me things like that. Yes, do this and blah, blah, blah. And I don't put any resistance, because I could have said, oh no, I just do straight ahead, you know.
Of course. Yeah.
I didn't have the repertoire ready to do a concert, like that, like she was mentioning it. And that was that show when she proposed it to me was like 2 months, ahead of time, right? So, I was like, okay, instead of putting resistance, I'm just going to take it as a challenge and I'm just going to see what happens, if I just take it. And that's what I did. So, once you have a defined date and defined objective, then you can lay out your plan to make it happen. And that was the process of, me concentrating all that effort in those 2 months of making the repertoire, finding the musicians to do that project, because it's a challenging project, with all the array of cultures that we have here in Houston. Doing Latin jazz is not just taking a bunch of Latin people and calling it jazz. It doesn't work like that. Those Latin people, they need to know very well the jazz and sound like the straight ahead American style jazz, like if they were native. So pretty much they need to be bilingual, completely bilingual, musically speaking. And of course, that limits the array of possibilities even more. But thank God, Houston is a wonderful city. We have a lot of people that have come from different places, and that's the reason why in my project I was able to reunite top musicians that include countries like Cuba, Brazil, Puerto Rico, of course, here, the US, and Venezuela. we never do things from zero zero. We always take from everywhere. So but the difference is that we process it in a different manner than somebody else would do. And I think there are references, and you could possibly hear some of my influences here and there, but it would be probably difficult to pinpoint that it's just this influence or just that influence or just that influence, because you can tell that I've listened to a lot of things. And then comes my own interpretation too, right? Is I have a voice that only sounds like Raquel Cepeda's voice. It
Mhm.
doesn't sound like anything else. And when I if I sing it, it's gonna sound different. So um, that's the beauty of being unique, and we all are unique, right? So yeah, I think we're all building upon everybody else's work,
Upon
and
other ideas, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely true because I would always say like when when I drive around, that's when I'm like my most creative because I'm looking at everything that's built, all the businesses, all of the like, parks and different landmarks, and I'm seeing the ideas of other people around me, and what that's doing is generating even more to build on. And more so I was focusing more on Houston because I'm not very sure if Houston has a big, how you said, like a big Latin jazz community. I'm not very sure if that's a thing or
Well, we have something that has built the Latin jazz community for several years. One of those things is a show made by Juan Flores. It's called Jazz Latino, and it's broadcasted over Pacifica 91.9, I think it is, FM. And it happens twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So over the years, it's been 17 years that Juan Flores has been doing a fantastic selection of Latin jazz specifically. So he has built already a
Mhm.
community around him. Of course, then you also have the jazz community per se that is curious about this. I think for a Latin jazz, for a jazz person, the Latin jazz comes as something really exotic, or something
That was
like
me.
it's a shock. Right? Oh my god, what is that I'm hearing?
Yeah,
Right?
that was me.
So you have people from the jazz community per se that are curious and that are exploring it, and of course, then you also have um, the jazz audience that come from all the different uh, countries, that even if they're not necessarily plugged into Juan Flores's community, or necessarily following all the jazz happenings, they're really open to Latin jazz. So what can I say? How big is it? It's still limited, I have to say. It's even more limited probably than the jazz community per se. But the good thing is that you can never um, disregard what what you're passionate about. What in this case Latin jazz, just because you don't know a lot of people that is not as popular, for example,
Right.
that from as country music, right?
Yeah.
um, but what you need to do is promote it, because the more exposure it gets, the more people realize that is a fantastic, phenomenal, exciting, flavorful, uh, intelligent kind of music. So it allows for that community to continue to grow.
Yeah, I feel like in general, like even if it's like a small community, I think it will, in my perspective, that would make me even want to even more dive into it. Because then I'm like, okay, wow, I'm one of the few who are doing this, so maybe I can get something going. But I feel like it depends on the individual and like how you are like, because some people are like, oh, I don't want to do this because so many people are doing it. But how you said, no one is you. No one's gonna bring that of what you can bring. And one of the main things that I was very interested in because I see that we have a similarity because we are Venezuelan. And I was interested in what Venezuela has brought as an influence to your work, because for me, I am an international studies student, and that's my major in university. And the thing that really like made me want to begin this journey was the fact that I wanted to do something for my country. I wanted to go back, learn about what global economics, or about how politics works on a global spectrum, and maybe go back and make some sort of change, some impact. But what ended up happening with me was that the more that I traveled, the more I got into a little bit less focused on Venezuela. And then I began travel blogging. I started to kind of write stories about instances that happened to me abroad. And like, there's this Costa Rica blog post that I never published, and I hope to one day publish it and like make it into an animation, into like a little movie. Because what I did was that I got the bigger purpose of that moment. I wanted to show people how every part of the world there is complexity to all, how everything forms part of a bigger purpose and interconnection, right? And I started seeing that the more I traveled and the more I expanded on one little moment. I was in front of an estuary in Costa Rica in the ocean. I was swimming by myself, very lonely. Those things can be dangerous because apparently I think it's crocodiles go into the ocean from the estuary, something like that. The locals weren't there, nobody was there. But in that moment, I was able to expand not only, what I've learned from like Costa Rica is a place where like the beaches are mostly made public. There's certain space where it can be public access, and I feel like that's awesome because land shouldn't be shut off, like something that's natural for the world shouldn't be shut off to the people who naturally are born here, right? And I made that connection, like, wow, I'm able to enjoy this moment because Costa Rica is such a open place like that. They make their nature a place where people can be recreative with it. And and that's very far off from where I began. It was like international studies, help Venezuela, and then I still am. I want to do this with you. I want to people to see how an immigrant like you, like me, can bring to the table to other countries, because unfortunately some people do not see that, and it's very structural view of things. But I want to pretty much encourage that view. But in general, coming from like wanting to help Venezuela politically in some way, and then switching all the way to making interconnections about self-development in other locations, that's what I'm very interested in. And that connection in the mind of someone that someone makes to like just switch like that, that's what
Mhm.
I'm interested in. I really want to know what if there's anything in particular that Venezuela played a role in your style of, I mean, I know in your style of music, yes, Latin jazz, but is there like a sort of upbringing in Venezuela that really, makes you like really you could emphasize to this day and be like, yes, I'm doing this because Venezuela had this influence on me.
Well, yeah, definitely. I don't think that if I wouldn't have lived and be born in Venezuela, I would have been able to bring all those rhythms to jazz. Because Venezuela is also a big melange of cultures, and yes, we have not only living in Latin America, you get exposed to all the different cultures that are particular to Latin America, but the influence from the different indigenous cultures, the African culture. So yeah, it's I think when I did this project for that jazz club, to me it was empowering to be Venezuelan. It was like, okay, if somebody can do this, that would probably be me, because not because it's me, but because I come from Venezuela, and I
Right.
and I have been exposed to the core to all of this, and it should be, really easy, and it was, and it ended up being. Now, of course, Venezuela still continues in my heart and in every cell of my being, um, regardless of how much more you incorporate from the world and how much you become a citizen of the world. Venezuela is still in you. And I have, I think my projects, like my two late albums that are as a soloist, you can tell that I reserve at least one song to honor Venezuela.
Really?
In the first CD, I'm confessing, it was Tonada de Luna Llena that I recorded from Simon Diaz. And on this one, I have actually several ones from Venezuela. One of those is Llorarás. Um, the other is Moliendo Café. And I have another one that I wrote to Venezuela to talk about the massive exodus of Venezuelans, because of the political and economic situation, having to just leave the country by foot. So it's called Luz de Luna. And it talks about, I mean, the fact that I am choosing to honor Venezuela in my projects, it tells you how important it is for me.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's the same. Like I feel like for me, what came to me was like, you want to help, but you're already doing this podcast. What can you do? You can't just go over there and like uh, do some change like physically. I mean, like you could, but I mean, I don't know how to do that. It's very limited too, right? But I was like, okay, you do this podcast. Have some Venezuelan people over and show the people who we are, and that's exactly like what I was thinking. It was kind of like your music. I was in the backyard last night and I was listening to it, and I never heard anything like it. It was a pretty cool experience because there was a lot of different, like the CD I'm confessing, right? I didn't know that there was music that was influenced by the diaspora. I didn't know that, and I feel like that's a really important thing to know now, because now I'm gonna go back and really get into it. But it was definitely something that really caught my eye, was the fact that you had in the CD Passion, right? It's called Passion.
the latest
Um
one. Hmm.
Right. It has this water imagery. And I really wanted to mention this. I was gonna leave this till the end, but I feel like it was so appealing to the eye to see you underwater, and especially because I like the beach, and maybe that's just why. But I know how it feels to, as a, because I myself make music, and I'll explain later that like what happened to me and like my fallout. But I know how important it is, emotions, to be portrayed in work, in music. And I feel like in general, I saw you in the water, right? I saw you in your CD, and then that's your cover. You're in like a pool. And recently I had, it's been raining around here, and the rain in a way kind of purged these emotions out of me, where I immediately grabbed my guitar and I was like, you have to get this tsunami on paper, because for some reason, like I came back to music. It's been a while since I made music, but I was like, the water, something, the water, emotions also represented by water. There's this movement within me that needs to be, that's being cleansed by something, and also needs to be purged. And how can we do this? How can I do this? I grabbed my guitar and I made a song the other day, and that's how I got back to music. And then I saw it was a weird interconnection, because I love when this happens, because I saw you underwater in that, and then I saw that you had an Instagram post where you were talking about how I think it's like you were in a pool and like they were taking pictures of you, and you as well had a YouTube video that was called
From
Moon
afar.
River.
Oh, Moon River too. Yeah. Hmm.
Moon River, an offering to the water. And that made me, because you were in a cenote, and I wanted you to tell me about that moment, because I know as a creative, water is something special. There's something there for us, and it's something that really
Absolutely.
gets us going.
Yeah, I think you're right. Water is a big metaphor for our feelings, our the internal movement of our world, of our thoughts, of our feelings. And I think. like you said, when you submerge yourself in water, it's like you're cleansing, you're letting out, you're letting go. um, it's funny because this the water scenery for my album came more as a you know I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know what to do for my cover. But my friend, the same one that she's a very good friend of mine. She's always like really uh, um, um, suggesting and doing things. She's wonderful in that regard. She connected me with this photographer. I'm sorry for my verging. What I wanted to say is
It's
that this
okay.
friend is the same one of the club. Okay,
Yeah, I got that.
so
Mm,
then a couple years later, she came and say, "Hey, I know this photographer. He does underwater photography, and why don't you just go and do a session with him?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm great. I mean, that's fantastic because you can always do with more photos, right? That's you have to continue always being producing that kind of stuff." And I was not expecting that to be part of the album, honestly. But when you think about passion, and the name of the album was set from the very beginning, that I knew. Passion, you're submerged into that internal movement of your intuition, and 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 you're listening to what your heart is telling you, and how it's calling you. So in the end, it was a perfect fit. Once I saw the pictures, I'm like, well, this totally makes sense. And when you asked about the cenote, the video of Moon River, that was a very, very special moment. So once I went into that cave, I I felt transported. Is like I was, you know, it was like a sacred space, and the water had a color that is very difficult to describe. I have never seen that color in water, because you go to a beautiful beach like Bahamas, Los Roques is turquoise water, but this was a different, darker kind of turquoise. I don't know the name for that color.
yeah.
But once you are in there, it's like you're in a spiritual world. It's like, oh my God, you're disconnected from whatever external thing is happening. And I felt that if I could just make silence, I could listen to what the water had to say. I could listen to all the stories of all the people that had been there. Um, all the love stories and the drama stories and the heartache and the happy stories and the loss. And it's like I could listen everything, and it was carried by the water. And you know my husband was with me, and he was just swimming around and around, and I was just sitting ecstatic, just looking at it and listening. And I said to my husband, please go ahead and record what I'm going to do. And it was only him and I I kind of felt a little vulnerable because even though he has recorded me so many times on concerts, it was just him and I. And I was not just singing to perform. I was singing uh, for this very special and intimate connection that I had with the water and everything it was saying to me. Now, what do you sing in a situation like that? What do you say? So the only thing that came to my mind was that song, Moon River. And he talks about hope, and he talks about the journey, and he talks about meeting at the end, of that journey. So somehow, intuitively, it carried what I was feeling at that cave.
Yeah, the world is becoming spiritual. Like I'm seeing people getting into more spiritual mindset,
Mhm.
mind and heart. And see, even talking about this on my podcast and on my YouTube in general, because I am very spiritual. And then whenever I saw the water stuff, I was like, okay, she's spiritual too. And I felt, it's even you talking about that, it's like a soothing thing. It's something that calms me down. And like it calms, I think people that are very sensitive and like have a lot of emotions in them, water does something. Because I mean, I shower a lot and it does something to me. And I'm always craving this beach thing. And I mentioned the water because, in general, there's so many things in this world that we can take for granted. And I feel like when it comes to moments like that, it's a very special sort of realization that you have. It's kind of like it's almost as if it means that everything around you, people, land, in general, nature, it's like you can always get something out of it. And like I was speaking about earlier, the complexity of things is grand. Everything's complex, and that's why creative work to me can sometimes be overwhelming because I'm like, oh, I want to talk about everything, And in the moment, I have to calm down because I'm like, you can't do that. You have to have some sort of discipline. And how you said, you spoke about how that your friend, because we always say your friend, but I know what friend you're talking about, the girl who got you into the club, the woman, right? And, you know, for me, you said that she set up a date, right? She set up a date for you to go in there, do Latin jazz, try it out. And I recently set a date for myself. It was 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I think, to begin to have discipline in my life because I do these podcasts, I do these conversations, right? And
Mhm.
there's this lack of sometimes there's this lack of discipline. How you said, well, you said mostly like there was this date set. That's what you said. And what I got from that was kind of like a sign. It was like, and I know I'm being very analytical, but sometimes you kind of have to be because it's not an esoteric thing. Like there's
Absolutely.
always things being told to you. You just have to listen. You have to open up your mind, right? And like your heart to the fact that things are way more mystical than you believe they are. And it's like it's
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
spirits living a material experience, and
Mm,
in all of us there is a yearning, no matter what you believe, no matter what your set of beliefs are. There is a yearning for the spirit. There's a yearning for understanding, why are we here? Why do we have a conscience? Why do we feel, why do we have to be here at this moment? And it's undeniable that we feel that, not only internally, but we feel it as a relationship also with other people, but we also feel it as a more transcendental level.
mm-hmm.
um, and this is a beautiful subject too. And just, I don't want to extend overly into this, but I do have to say that we are all vessels that need that spirituality, and because we're spiritual beings and we can not get away from that.
That helps. I mean, for me, that's how I move. I can't move without. And see, even speaking about these things, I would be a little before. I'd be like, "Oh, don't do it because it's not really like the setup that you traditionally people talk about." But it's like this is the crux of my movement. Like even your art. Like I was pretty sure there's something there because whenever I wasn't in that realm of understanding that there's more going on that we can't even perceive, and like inside it feels like that. And like whenever you shut that off, because I shut that off, like there's times where you're gonna like shut whatever comes to you, and like the feeling of wanting to connect to something else, something like more that you can't really understand. Whenever you get that feeling, sometimes you can shut off from it. You can get a little bit a little bit I guess, skeptical of such a thing. And then when that happens to me, I feel like my whole world crumble. I feel like I don't understand, I don't connect with people, I don't connect with myself. There's nothing really happening. This is why I talk to you about this, because there's an importance to this. Yes, it is important to, get to the basics, talk about, oh yeah, this is what Raquel does, and this is what I do. But it's always about, it's like these, I'm always yearning for this. I want to hear more. There's something more in the works, and people are seeing, it seems to be a move where people are moving to talk about these sort of things. But it's like, this is like helping people in general. Like, I'm seeing so many people transform by talking about like this, how you said, this awareness that they're spiritual, their soul craves for this sort of knowledge, this sort of
Yeah,
connection, right? But
absolutely.
and I wanted to mention, because earlier I gave a little bit of a cliffhanger in the beginning. I was like, in 2015, something changed for Raquel, and I really wanted to get to it because it has to do with leapers, has to do with people transforming, people shifting, and there's no chaos in that. More of a learning experience, and that's what I want to, in general, emphasize. So in 2015, things changed for you, right? In 2015, it says on your biography, on your biography online, it says, in 2015, Raquel decided to take the leap as a full-time artist, from a geologist and then transitioning to music. I know you talk about that often, but I would love to know, how did you get out of the corporate world? Like, that's a very big thing that people don't know what to do. It's like, there's this push and pull, how you said, always. And it's like, how did you make it out of that world that was such a big part of you?
Yeah, thinking about it in retrospective, and I think for any people that would see this from outside, it's it's crazy, it's big, and indeed it was. When I grew up in Venezuela, my goal was to, uh, retire from the oil industry. My ambition was to be the best at my job. It was to, be recognized and enjoy doing science. And but it's really funny. I mean, I think we have to step back a little bit into what we as humans perceive as the way of moving forward, right? And how do we perceive our lives need to develop? I think it's very limited at this time. And like we were talking before, you say that there's a lot of people turning into spirituality because somehow, for some reason, for the past years, we have been somehow denied of the freedom to recognize that we are spiritual beings. Is like, oh, no, if it's not science, it's not right. And before anybody says anything, I'm a scientist. I know what I'm
Hmm.
talking about. So we cannot just um, see our world only from a scientific perspective and provable perspective, because science is not an end in itself. It's not a like a point in time that stays forever. That point that you think you're seeing 10 years from now, you're going to see in a transform in a different manner. It's going to have a different significance for you because you're going to find different tools to understand what that is that you're really seeing. So in science, we're never really reaching the goal of ultimate understanding. Never. We're always discovering there's something more.
Hmm.
So to think that we got it all solved because that's what the latest paper said, that's kind of limited. It is limited.
Hmm.
So now, what was I saying this? Okay, changes in and how do we perceive our life, right? And how it has to develop. Um, Now, when we come into this world, and our parents want the best for us, of course, they want an education for us that allows us to be independent, to make good money so that we don't have any necessities, or that we can be on our own and be happy and everything. And that's beautiful, but that conditions you to choose what do you want to be, right? I want to be a scientist. I want to be a dentist. I want to be a writer. And then you grow up with that box in your head. And then, if you one day, after writing many books, in the case that you decided to be a writer, said, you know what, I want to explore another aspect of my life like this. And then there's a voice inside of you that says, "Oh, what's gonna say your professional society? Oh, you're veering into a different territory. You're not gonna be recognized for what you really are. All these voices inside of your head start kind of like uh, mining that freedom to grow and expand. And so in my case, I said, okay, I'm going to be a geologist because I really like science. And then, of course, I didn't have to ask permission to anybody. I did music at the same time just because it, I'm, I like it. It's fun. I love it. Um, but I came to that point one day where I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep my music activities in secret from the company because I don't want that to undermine my professional image, right?
Right.
Um, and then, you start thinking about these things and it's like, okay, seriously. You come to think about how, senseless are all those reasonings. But the reason really why I decided to change my north, let's see, my ambition, I don't know if that would be, or my goal career wise, is that I did realize, okay, I got to know a lot of things that I wanted to know science wise. So curiosity wise, I was covered. I got to live in the corporate world with all the benefits that it gives. Check, great. Um, and then music was just taking over. I had recorded my first album. It was going really well. It was taking a lot of my time. And I'm like, okay, if I want to let music grow, I have to think about, or if I continue doing just geology like I'm doing, I'm going to have to let go of music at the level that I want to take it to, because I wanted to take it to a professional level, really high quality. So, I started to have that conflict. And at the same time, some things were changing inside me, things that I never considered before, because of putting myself into that box of I am a scientist. I started to think, okay, what if I was an artist full time? What if um, I did this for a living? What if I didn't have the security of a salary every every 15 and end of the month? Um, and those questions that I started making myself were daunting. I could not imagine myself taking those kinds of risks. And I had to do a lot of research to see how other people lived in order to be at peace with that. So with all those, all that research, and also something inside me, my brain, I think, was changing. I don't know what it was, honestly. Um, but I started to question, well, this company that I'm giving everything I have to, that I am putting all my passion, my sweat, my tears, everything. This is the projects that I'm doing here are going to stay with the company. But what about my own projects? What about my own dreams and goals? Um, I do have prizes. If I didn't have them, then no big deal, but I did have them. So it all came to this realization that I had to do a plan to be at a place where I could make a decision if I wanted to. Like if I knew I had some gaps on the music side, I was going to fill them up so that by a certain amount of time, I could say, okay, is it worth continuing in the oil industry or is it worth moving towards the music? So I did that. I did myself a plan of 3 years of classes that I wanted to take and learning about advertising, about other aspects in music that I wasn't very strong at, like music theory and things like that. Working with jazz ensembles. So I took classes on all of that, and then it's funny because at the end of that time frame that I had already set, and that's why I told you that dates are a wonderful thing.
Yes.
Um, the big oil industry crash came in 2015, and um, they laid off a lot of people in the company. They gave me the opportunity to leave as well, and I did consider it very much. But then here comes the thing that I was too busy to even make that application. So the deadline passed, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll see when it comes again. But then I was laid off as well. But the good thing is that I have been working in the company for 10 years. So somehow the God forced me to say, you know what, enough is enough. You have a plan. You have done what you need to do. Now you need to fly on your own. And I took it as an opportunity really to take the chance, take the leap, and not look back.
Exactly. Yeah, because there's this sort of like chaos at times that we believe is existent when we are willing to consider a new decision. And I think that's like what I kind of want to alleviate people with is the fact that people think that they have to, how you said, be this one thing or be under this label. And I've had issues with that too, because in general, I'm still in school and I have my own story about that, and my other podcasts talk about that. It's very conflicting internally because as somebody who does this and is interested in film and is interested in singing, right, it's very conflicting to be in this school environment where you're always focusing on the same thing. It's like the most of what you do most of your time, and how you said it leaves you a bit depleted, because then later on the things that feed your soul, because some things might not feed your soul as much as others, right? But see, sometimes we tend to prioritize what doesn't, because of usually it's what we think we have to do in a societal manner. And that's kind of like what happened to me when I got into school. And that's why I'm doing all this. And then it helps me to see how you came about this, because you said something as if we're not these we're not like a matchbox where it's like you said something like that, right? Like we're not labeled under this. Oh yeah, this is a matchbox. This is all it is. It just matches inside. It's more than that. And I think what really I want people to understand is kind of like some people are very very like kind of upset, almost depressed in their being, because they don't know exactly what they want to embark on, and they're stuck in a way that they do not like. And I feel like when I always talk about this, when I see the eyes of people and people who tell me these things, they're very droopy. And then like what I want to do is not give people oh, this is your life purpose. This is what I'm trying to help you, is giving you understand your life purpose, because I believe we have different missions here. It's more so when you first pick up that one thing, or those two things that you're interested in, that gets the ball going. And I think people just need to get at least one thing, that really speaks to them. And then that's just a world of opportunities opens up. And that's what I want to help people with, is not, oh, here's your life purpose, I'm going to help you with that. No, it's, come here, there's purpose in your being, there's purpose in your existence. We don't have to label that, we don't have to, but let's get you going on one thing that really speaks to you, and then you'll see the amount of expansion of the individual that you can become, like that you are in general, but that you can actually start materializing, right? And See, for when it came to music, when it came to music for me, because I'm it's valid for me to talk about music because although I'm not like set up, I don't have a YouTube that's Valerie's music. You know what I mean? Like I haven't yet published any songs. I've made music since I was young. And see, what I didn't get in my little head was the fact that it's okay to make music. Just because you go to school and you are doing this track, and how you were doing, right, this specific track in the moment predominantly, doesn't mean you can't make music. And that's what's been happening recently. It's like, and it's so alleviating to come to the point that's like, oh my gosh, you're saying I don't have to define myself under this career, and I can make myself into all these different things with patience but discipline in a way to reach that goal. Because that's what I was telling you earlier. Important, yes, set the date, important, because what I did was, you know what, let's start doing an itinerary. We call it the change the world itinerary. And let's start doing this itinerary where I start every day doing a little bit of what I love. And they're all different things. Music, I want to help people, I want to guide people, I want to be like a purpose sort of guide, where I want to help people in a way come across their interests and passions, because some people think they don't have any, but they do. It's all about exploring. It's not about, oh, this is your life purpose. It's about, hey, let's get you started on something, so you know that you have purpose here. You know that you feel satisfied with at least something, to begin with, and you'll see it become more complex.
You have
And
to give yourself permission too
yeah.
for to explore those things, and sometimes that's the most difficult thing to do, is to allow to give yourself the permission beyond all your perceptions or where you should be, where you should go, how you should behave, and also understand that life, it's a little bit simpler than the schemes that we do have in our days. So that is key to allow yourself to give permission. So, but sorry for interrupting you.
No,
Continue
no, no,
on.
no. But this is a conversation. I always say, no, this is a conversation. This is what I love. Like, come in whenever you want, because in interviews, I don't really do interviews. This is a conversation for me. I love that. I love that you can give me something, because then I'm like able to build more. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's how you said it, permission, because I didn't give myself permission. I didn't. I was like, because it's hard to look at every like people on social media, and then you see like they're like defined into this thing. Oh, I'm an actress, or I'm that, and then you're like, oh, okay, what am I? You know what I mean? But then it's like, that's what, when you drop those things, like once you drop it, it's such a relief. Once you drop it and just
Yeah.
do, see what happens. Like, stop, like, what?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like, and see, like, whenever I first heard about you, it was in 2015, around that time actually. I think I actually met you around that year, because I remember I was in high school. I have a weird memory where I remember like numbers. Like I remember like how old I was, or like what age what I looked like, and then I match it to a number. It's
Oh,
weird,
great.
but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not good with numbers, but that's the only thing I do with numbers. And it's funny that you had that leap in 2015, because I remember my dad, we were in a Venezuelan, I think it was a Venezuelan gathering, and I was young. I was in high school, and I remember I saw you. I think I remember seeing you, and I did, and yeah, I think you were singing actually, and at that time, I was a singer too, and I am still. And my dad mentioned you. He was like, "Hey, you should talk to her because she sings, and you do too. Ask for advice." And I was like, "No, I'm good." Like I was so shy. But life comes around. It's kind of like it's a cool thing to have you here, because it's like, there's this, it's maybe there was a reason for that moment, whenever, it's like that the time that you were picking up music again, I dropped it.
Yeah. So, 2015 was a year not necessarily for me to pick it up again, because I had actually been doing it very
Mm,
intensively up to that point. It was just a moment where I said, I'm going to leave space in my life to do only music.
yeah.
Only music. No, I'm not going to have other priorities, but to work on my projects. And that's going to be it.
Yeah, yeah, it's more of like you made it a career move, more to
Hmm.
say, like more of a, okay, as a main shift for sure. And definitely, like, I think from now on, See, like I'm excited because what's gonna happen? I'm gonna release a song. What? I mean, you don't gotta call me a singer. You can call me whatever you want, but I know what I like. You know what I mean? I know what I like. I don't need to. In when I know in life, it gets a little bit more materialistic. Where, like, you need the monetary funds to do certain things, and, like, whatever way, so you're gonna get that income coming in. But I think in general people worry a lot about that. But then when I talk to people like you, oh, there's relief, because it's like sometimes it just comes together. And there was a quote that you said, um it's some gifts we share and benefit a few, and some gifts have the power to benefit many. And it's a quote that I want to end on because I think it's a very important one.
Yes, yes. So on that particular quote, I what I want to say is, well, I was trained in the sciences, and I had a gift for geology. I think historically, the predictions that I did were really well received by my peers, and I felt that I contributed a lot in the oil industry, where in the projects that I was. And you could call that a gift, right? And something that you trained for, something that you do with love and passion. But then, of course, I have this other gift, which is music and singing and communicating through my voice. Um, so, you know, who who do I benefit more, and in what manner, through the use of my gifts? Like I said before, if I'm putting all my energy and passion and love in the oil industry, everything stays in the projects of the oil industry. And true, I'm benefiting the project in themselves, but I feel that I have a better use for that energy in reaching the heart of somebody, and communicating a message that may change somebody else's moment or perspective about life, or mood, or open themselves up to something different. I think that that's a more worthy way of spending my energy and passion.
Exactly. It's almost as if it's simple, and it's like people overcomplicate such things. And I wanted to tell you, thank you so much for being on this show. I will have all your information in the description of this episode, and we will catch the Wanderers on the next one. Thank you so
Yay.
much.
Thank you, Valerie. And thanks to all of you that are watching this interview. I hope the best to you, Valerie, with this channel. And I applaud you for your effort and your initiative of highlighting these stories. It's beautiful. And also, all the best in your career and your next moves in life.